Blade Runner as a series is no stranger to identity ambiguity, but with the lack of answers, I don't think figuring out who's a replicant and who's not is the right way to think about it. At least not right now. Instead, I think it's worth exploring how Blade Runner 2049 in particular leverages the concept of identity into a narrative that is profound and philosophical as hell.
Oh, you don't even smile.
It may seem like a lousy question, but it's worth bringing to the forefront. Why revolve stories around the concept of identity at all? You've got to remember, stories are designed to explain a perception of the world in a way that helps explain it to others who are limited to their own perceptions, aka all of us. Not that we can't empathize or understand each other, but I can't put my mind and put it into your head and see how you understand things perfectly. We just can't. Which is also known as the explanatory gap, which I think we will always have. In a world where we are generally becoming more and more isolated, stories of identity are evolving because from the way I see it, they explain the perception of the loneliness one person feels, rather than an idol that represents the assumed standards of a specific era or generation. Not to say those kinds of stories are extinct, but I've noticed something of a shift that emphasizes the evolution of isolation. An individual who isn't alone, but lonely. From the dialogue to the studying gaze to the posture he presents to others, Officer K, or Joe, is one of the best depictions of social alienation I've seen within the past decade. There are plenty of reasons why this is the case in the narrative. He's a cop, which to some is a villain by occupation. He's a replicant who has an AI girlfriend, which is weird when you think about the fact that he's a robot who decides that instead of finding another replicant partner, he finds a partner that's less human than he is, further adding to the isolation because there's no equal that he connects with. But, all things considered, he has a specific kind of idea regarding his own identity, which is where the memories come in, and the wooden horse, which of course fucks him over when he finds out that they are somebody else's memories instead of his own, and that he isn't the only replicant to have this experience, doubling down on his insignificance and taking away his alleged perception of a chosen one. Well, alleged insignificance. Basically, Ryan Gosling was a fall guy before his role in Fall Guy. Now, despite this becoming a top 5 of all time for me as soon as I saw it in theaters, like I wasn't even done with it and I knew that it was a top 5, I couldn't help but scratch my head at the realization of him being quote-unquote worthless than I thought. Despite this becoming a top 5 of all time for me as soon as I saw it in theaters, I couldn't help but scratch my head at the realization of him being more quote-unquote worthless than I thought. Why was Kay significant in any way other than leading Neander Wallace to Rick Deckard, which eventually kicks off the climax and the reunion of Deckard and his daughter? Would the events have changed if Kay was never there? Obviously, after finishing the film and seeing his intervention, the answer is easily yes, the events would have changed if he wasn't there. And I would argue it's because of Kay's realization of the concept of Sonder. If you haven't heard of this before, that's okay. Apparently, it's still recognized by some software as a typo. Case in point, Google Docs right now as I'm writing the script, but the official definition is as such. Sonder is, quote, the feeling one has on realizing that every other individual one sees has a life as full and real as one's own, in which they are the central character and others, including oneself, have secondary or insignificant roles. And I love the example they had so much that I added it as well. In a state of Sonder, each of us is at once a hero, a supporting cast member, and an extra in overlapping stories. I'm not going to argue the ethics of whether or not replicants and lesser replications of life can be deemed as having life, because that's not really the function of this video essay. And honestly, I'm too smooth-brained to really have a strong stance against trolls in the comments section on the matter. But instead, I want to go back to the argument of what's the point of identity in narrative? Especially in a narrative like Blade Runner 2049, or to a further extent, Blade Runner, where the real gut punch is the realization that the character you spend the most time with and become the most invested in is nothing more than a passerby in the bigger picture. Well, I think it's this. And it's that iconic shot where Kay confronts his ex, I guess? Here, I think there's a few realizations in this moment. His love wasn't legitimate. He was motivated by this character he prioritized, and if he can choose to do that, he can choose something else. Now, let's translate this through a lens in the concept of Sonder. He was an extra in most other stories. He made certain people a secondary character in relation to his personal role as a protagonist, and despite being a protagonist only to himself, he can be an empowered, supported cast member to others. In doing so, he fulfills a more powerful purpose than what he originally had. But it was all about changing the identity he assigned himself. Sure, he was his own protagonist, but he was an island, fed by the us versus them belief system. Joy, as a consequence, wasn't necessarily a separate entity, but rather a programmed soundboard to enable Kay's beliefs and increase his isolation, ironically enough. By making himself more aware of others' roles in their own stories, the stories of others, and maybe even the stories of those who will never know him, Kay is able to reconstruct his identity by providing more of an active function in the narratives of others. This might be one of the major reasons why it's worth revolving stories around the concept of identity. They demonstrate an ability to change, an ability to connect, and an ability to provide a multi-layered purpose to oneself. In a world where it's easier to slip away into social media and AI babes, the creation of self-value and self-worth is becoming even more important than we could ever realize. Which is pretty impressive for a sci-fi legacy sequel that came out before the COVID-19 pandemic and the AI boom. Or at least just as it was getting started. But let me know in the comments, what do you think of Sonder? What other stories about identity really spoke to you? And which Blade Runner do you prefer? The original or 2049? Or the anime series? Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, and once again, thanks for watching this video by the Borealis Company.
My mom still cries over the lost baby pictures.
Well, it's a shame. You must have been adorable.